Economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, affirmed today in Algiers that the Intra-African Trade Fair hosted by Algeria last September was an opportunity for public and private economic operators to demonstrate that the national economy is on the right track. Several countries condemned the Zionist attack on the Samud flotilla in international waters as people have gathered in many cities around the world to protest against the occupation's interception of the flotilla. In Morocco, 2 citizens were killed in violent repression by the Makhzen agents while taking part in peaceful demonstrations protesting against the socio-economic situation in the country and calling for an end to corruption. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, affirmed today in Algiers that the Intra-African Trade Fair hosted by Algeria last September was an opportunity for public and private economic operators to demonstrate that the national economy is on the right track. Speaking at the Abdeltif Rahal International Conference Center at the opening of a meeting with economic operators to promote the success of the 4th edition of the fair, the President said that a strong state is one that has strong economy, a strong army, and a conscious and patriotic people. The President took the opportunity to thank all those who worked to present a positive image of the country, which hosted this week-long event that attracted widespread attention from Africa and the world, hailing the efforts of foreign trade officials and the constant support of the Algerian Economic Renewal Council and the security services, who demonstrated a high level of professionalism. He also stressed that this success was the result of the collective mobilization of all sectors alongside foreign partners. Now, the Prime Minister, Mr. Sifi Ghraib, has chaired a government meeting devoted to examining the draft Finance Bill 2026, monitoring the results of the IATF, as well as the digitization of transactions and the development of micro-enterprises. The government also reviewed a draft law on trust services for electronic transactions and electronic identification, aimed at creating a unified national framework for certification and electronic signature to promote secure digital services. In addition, the government heard a communication on the results of the 4th Intra-African Trade Fair and its follow-up mechanisms. On this occasion, emphasis was placed on the state's efforts for the success of the 4th Intra-African Trade Fair, described as a total success for the African continent, with contracts exceeding expectations and a record number of visitors both in person and remotely. The government also examined measures to sustain this dynamic for continental economic integration and reviewed a roadmap for developing micro-enterprises through the National Agency for Entrepreneurship Support and Development and the National Agency for Microcredit Management to boost financial inclusion, create jobs, and integrate them into value chains with appropriate financing. Now, international officials have praised Algeria's key role in managing irregular or illegal migration through the development of efforts undertaken in this regard and within the framework of international cooperation. In a speech at the launch of a partnership project between Algeria and the International Center for Migration Policy Development, aimed at strengthening capacities in migration governance, the director Michael Spindelger highlighted Algeria's strong commitment to implementing this project, which will reinforce the close cooperation between the two parties. He stressed that Algeria is a leading partner in international cooperation and migration governance, with its leadership crucial for regional and global solutions.
Algeria has always assumed a particular role in terms of international cooperation at the global level, a role that goes far beyond the regional context and far beyond the field of migration. But also in this domain, Algeria is a leading actor and essential partner in all efforts to govern migration in a better and more beneficial way. As a major destination for international migrants and as an important point of transit for different types of migration flows, you share many of the challenges and opportunities in this policy field, and your leadership is and will be crucial for finding better solutions in the region and beyond.
Algeria's role in managing illegal migration was also praised from several sides, with emphasis on its expertise, humanitarian solutions, and dignity-based approach. Calls were made for joint efforts to combat criminal networks, strengthen international cooperation, and deepen partnerships with other countries. Now, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Lunas Megraman, received the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Mohamed Anis Mata, who is now on a working visit to the country. The meeting was an opportunity to discuss bilateral relations and ways to promote them in line with the good historical relations between the two brotherly countries. The two parties examined ways of strengthening them through activating the mechanisms for achieving these objectives, in particular the meeting of the Joint Bilateral Cooperation Commission. Earlier, the President of the National People's Assembly, Mr. Brahim Bughali, received the Indonesian official, during which Mr. Bughali expressed gratitude for Jakarta's position in favor of Algeria's membership of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. On the occasion, Mr. Bughali called for the activation of the cooperation protocol between the two parliaments and the expansion of the areas of economic partnership. The Indonesian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, for his part, stressed that his visit to Algeria was part of efforts to raise bilateral relations to the level of strategic partnership, reaffirming his country's willingness to boost economic cooperation with Algeria and promote joint investments in the best interests of both countries. Now, the Vice President of the National People's Assembly, Mr. Slimane Smaili, has highlighted during the Summit of Presidents of Parliament of the G20 held in Claremont, South Africa, Algeria's constant commitment to the values of justice, solidarity and international peace. The details with Masoud Sharfi.
In an address on behalf of APN President Mr. Brahim Bughali, Mr. Smaili highlighted the role of parliamentary diplomacy as a bridge between peoples, stressing that Algeria gives paramount importance to global parliamentary relations through visits and participation in regional and international fora, reflecting its unwavering commitment to justice and solidarity. He reaffirmed Algeria's support for Palestine, condemned crimes in Gaza, and reiterated the right to an independent state with Al-Quds as its capital, stressing Algeria's commitment to empowering women and youth, and recalled its climate initiatives, including a $1 billion fund for African development projects through the Algerian Agency for International Cooperation. In this context, the Vice President of the African Union AU Commission, Ms. Selma Malika Haddadi, speaking on behalf of AU Commission President Mahmoud Ali Yusuf at the G20 AU AI for Africa Summit in South Africa, stressed the imperative for Africa to harness digital transformation as a strategic tool to boost development, strengthen cooperation, and improve the governance of the international economy from within. She underlined that the AU's participation at the G20 table is a recognition of Africa's central role in shaping global priorities. Ms. Haddadi affirmed that artificial intelligence must not replace human creativity, but serve as a lever to transform individual capacities into significant impact, noting that aligning Africa's vision with AI opens new opportunities for value creation, prosperity, and development at both the continental and global levels. She also called on African youth to take the full advantage of emerging technologies and tailor them to African needs.
As you followed in our top stories, the organizers of the Samut flotilla announced that the Israeli occupation navy had intercepted 40 of the 44 boats that were on their way to the Gaza Strip as part of an international mission aimed at breaking the siege imposed on the Strip and delivering humanitarian aid amid the ongoing Israeli war of extermination that has been going on for nearly 2 years. Videos released by the flotilla organizers showed heavily armed occupation forces storming ships in international waters and arresting activists on board, including Greta Thunberg. No information is available on the total number of activists arrested, but Ankara announced the arrest of 24 Turkish citizens, while Colombia reported the arrest of 2 of its nationals. Kuwait announced the arrest of a number of its nationals, and Rome announced the arrest of 22 Italians. The occupation authorities said that the detainees would be deported to Europe without revealing the fate of the ships and humanitarian aid that were seized. Activists in the flotilla said that at least 2 ships were continuing on their way to the Gaza Strip despite the occupation forces intercepting most of the flotilla's boats. About 24 activist vessels carrying aid are still sailing towards besieged Gaza, including one that entered its territorial waters. Several countries condemned the Israeli attack on the flotilla in international waters. Shafi has more in this report.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says the capture of boats from the global Samut flotilla is a grave offense against global solidarity and sentiment that is aimed at relieving suffering in Gaza. Ramaphosa called on the occupation to immediately release South Africans on the flotilla, including anti-apartheid icon Nelson Mandela's grandson, Nkosi Zwelithini Mandela. Spain has summoned the Zionist entity's top representative in Madrid in response to the Israeli commanders intercepting the Gaza-bound flotilla. The Turkish foreign minister described the Israeli attack in a statement as a terrorist act that endangers the lives of innocent civilians. It added that it constitutes a flagrant violation of international law, especially since it targets civilians who are moving for peaceful purposes without using violence. For his part, Irish Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Defence Simon Harris said that the flotilla was a peaceful mission aimed at highlighting a terrible humanitarian disaster. He stressed the need to comply with international law and ensure that those participating in the flotilla are treated accordingly. Colombian President Gustavo Petro announced that his country expelled all members of Israel's diplomatic mission after its occupation army stormed ships belonging to the Samut fleet. Gustavo added that the free trade agreement with the occupation would be immediately cancelled. Brazilian Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira expressed his country's concern for the safety of the 15 Brazilian citizens on board of the flotilla, including a federal deputy. Venezuela described the Israeli attack as cowardly piracy and condemned the criminal nature of the Israeli occupation. In a statement, it asserted that the Israeli blockade of humanitarian aid is a deliberate weapon of war aimed at exterminating the population through starvation. Since March 2nd, Israel, the occupying power, has closed the crossing into Gaza, preventing any humanitarian aid from entering, plunging the Strip into famine despite the accumulation of relief trucks at its borders. This is the first time that some 50 ships have sailed together towards Gaza, carrying 532 civilian activists from more than 45 countries, as well as humanitarian aid, particularly medical supplies. The attack came despite calls from international organizations, including Amnesty International, to provide protection for the flotilla, and the United Nations' assertion that any attack on it would be unacceptable. The occupying power has previously engaged in acts of piracy against ships bound for Gaza, seizing them and deporting the activists on board.
For its part, Palestine's foreign ministry has condemned the occupation's attack and aggression against the Gaza aid flotilla. It said it's gravely concerned about the safety of those on board and holds Israel responsible for their security and well-being. The State of Palestine recalled that the Global Samud Flotilla is a peaceful and civilian-led initiative aimed at breaking Israel's inhuman and illegal blockade of the Gaza Strip and put an end to its starvation policy and genocide in accordance with international law. The State of Palestine reiterates that the occupation, whose was declared illegal by the International Court of Justice, has neither authority nor sovereignty over Palestine's territorial waters. Meanwhile, people have gathered in Greece, Italy, Germany, Tunisia and Turkey to protest against Israel's interception of the flotilla. Today's death toll in the Gaza Strip from the genocidal Israeli aggression reached 37. Moreover, at least 10,000 people are unaccounted for, presumed dead under the rubble of their homes throughout the Strip. Since the 7th of October 2023, the occupation has been committing crimes of genocide in the Gaza Strip, leaving 66,225 dead and 168,938 wounded, most of them children and women, and a famine that has claimed the lives of 455 citizens, including 151 children. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and as you followed in our top stories, 2 Moroccan citizens were killed on Wednesday by the Makhzen agents while taking part in peaceful demonstrations protesting against the socio-economic situation in the country and calling for an end to corruption. The details with Masoud Sharfi.
According to media outlets' reports, this is the most serious incident since the protests began last Saturday, initiated by a group of young people. These same sources also reported that more than 400 people were arrested and nearly 300 others injured on Wednesday, a day marked by massive protests in several Moroccan cities. The demonstrators were demanding, in particular, better public services in health and education, social justice, and an end to the corruption that plagues Moroccan institutions. Non-governmental organizations and youth movements have condemned the use of force against peaceful demonstrations. The Moroccan League for Defense of Human Rights has condemned the security approach adopted by the authorities, seeing it as an admission of failure by the government in the face of popular demands. The government merely reiterated the reforms it had undertaken while calling on demonstrators to keep their protests peaceful, but this response is considered insufficient by many observers. The bare minimum would be for the ministers of health and education to be dismissed, said a security source, lamenting that the government is leaving the police alone on the front line facing the streets.
Now, the Inter-Union Organization has called for another day of protest in France on October 2nd, following the demonstrations of September 18 and the Bloquant 2 protest on September 10. The Unions and Supporters Confederation aim to maintain pressure on Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, who is still working on his budget proposal for 2026. Authorities anticipate a 30% drop in participation, with approximately 250 demonstrations across France, potentially drawing between 300,000 and 350,000 people. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Stay tuned.